Keto and crime, keto and crime. We uncover the grime on keto and crime. Keto and crime, keto and crime. Now is the time for keto and crime.
Hey everyone, welcome to wrap up of day 9 of the Rittenhouse trial. Well, just as I predicted, we will have a verdict next week. Effectively, everything ended on Thursday, November 11th, as far as new evidence, and the judge is basically ordered no meeting of the trial today, Friday on the 12th, and then Monday they will start closing arguments, which each side has been allotted approximately 2.5 hours for that. So that will take all of Monday, and then from there, if a mistrial is not declared, they will give the trial will go to the jury, and then we will just have to wait for the verdict. So it only took 2 weeks. What I had predicted, it would take about 2 weeks. But basically what happened on Thursday. On Thursday, the defense wrapped up its case. They tried to drive home the point that it was purely self-defense on the part of Rittenhouse, who was down there with a lot of other concerned citizens who had guns for protection. The three final witnesses that the defense called were John Black, a use of force expert, Brittney K, a Kenosha police officer, and Frank Andrew Hernandez, a journalist who works for a conservative-leaning news site. And he had a lot of footage, much like Corey Washington did, of the different activities that were going on. Basically, as far as John Black and Brittney K, it was pretty cut and dry. They testified that Rittenhouse's mental state, that he was upset after it happened, and that it was indeed a needed use of force to protect himself from what he feared was a threat that could end his life. It got really hot and heavy with Frank Andrew Hernandez, who basically just testified to what he saw. Basically, the attacks on Rittenhouse, at least 2 of the ones that were shot, Rosenbaum and 𝐲𝐭𝐬, who their activities prior, and also showed a lot of footage that I have not seen of what was going on in Kenosha, and it frightened me. A lot of burning, a lot of shooting, a lot of beating of people. It was a war zone. It was a war zone. Of course, on re-examination, on cross-examination, Thomas Binger, who's the one that's been in all the papers, the one that kind of looks like the dude from Office Space. He basically kind of questioned Hernandez about his footage. He basically asked Hernandez where his footage came from, and Hernandez explained it came from a body cam on his chest and his cell phone, which was in his right hand. And he said it looked as though the footage was spliced. And he said, well, it was spliced to run side by side, but it wasn't spliced together to form a narrative, if that's what you're trying to ask. And then he asked him about the fact that he actually works for a conservative-leaning news agency called Real America's Voice, and he had called the violent riots violent for many times, and he kind of had a bias against them. And Hernandez said, well, when they're looting and burning, they are violent and they are riots. Very, 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 very professional on the stand. And Binger, as he has been doing over the last 2 weeks, got very emotional, got very argumentative, and was accusing him of being biased, and then also asked him why he, Hernandez, secured an attorney who was also affiliated with Rittenhouse's defense team to present and give all the footage to him. And he basically said, well, I'm involved in a highly publicized trial. I wanted to make sure my legal rights were protected. So just like any other person in America, I had the right to a lawyer, and I let the lawyer turn over the video, which you asked for as a prosecutor, and I gave it to you. I was also on assignment, and it just made more sense to have somebody submit that for me. I'm kind of summarizing what he said, but essentially, and then of course, the judge went off on Binger again, essentially telling him this is not a political trial. This is not here for a political statement. This is a trial, and you have no right to question somebody's right to an attorney. And this goes back to some of the other stuff Binger was trying to do, such as bringing evidence before the jury that had already been thrown out by the judge.
That briefly, Your Honor, I was about to say, I did not interpret your ruling as an absolute. We've had 3 state motions in limine. There was one in which we asked the court to introduce evidence that the defendant was at Pudgy's bar with Proud Boys, and you were clear that is not coming in. There was,
don't get into other subjects. Come on, what you're telling me, you're an experienced trial attorney, and you're telling me that when the judge says, I'm excluding this, you just to take it upon yourself to put it in because you think that you've found a way around it? Come on.
using deadly force to protect yourself and using it to protect property, correct?
Yes.
Mr. Richards?
Your Honor, Mr. Binger is either forgetting the court's rulings or attempting to provoke a mistrial in this matter. He knows he can't go into this, and he's asking the questions. I asked the court to strongly admonish him, and the next time it happens, I'll be asking for a mistrial with prejudice. He's an experienced attorney, and he knows better.
This was the subject of a motion. I'm well aware of that. And the court left the door open.
For me, not for you.
My understanding of
You should have come and asked for reconsideration. You did on the one motion, and in fact, I granted your motion for reconsideration.
That was not a motion.
Excuse me. I did. I granted.
We did not move
that
to
was
reconsider.
their motion.
We have not filed any
me.
motions to reconsider in this case.
That was their motion for reconsideration, which I denied. But I said I denied it, or I indicated a bias towards denial is what I did. Held it open with a bias towards denial. Why would you think that that made it okay for you, without any advance notice, to bring this matter before the jury?
Which is a huge violation and subject and could easily lead to a mistrial. I don't understand why the judge has not ordered a mistrial, because that was presented in front of the jury when it had already been ruled inadmissible. He also came after Rittenhouse, literally upon a rewatch, of remaining silent after arrest, asking him, well, if you're innocent, why didn't you talk about it to the police? And the judge, again, are you actually questioning this young man's Fifth Amendment rights? I don't know if
I was astonished when you began your examination by commenting on the defendant's post-arrest silence. That's basic law. It's been basic law in this country for 40 years, 50 years. I have no idea why you would do something like that. And it gives, well, I'll leave it at that. So I don't know what you're up to.
May I respond?
Yes.
We filed an other acts motion on this exact issue because, in my mind, and I argued this, it is identical to what was going on the night of August 25th, in the sense that the defendant was using this exact same weapon. He was using it in a manner to try and protect property.
No, he wasn't.
Your Honor, with all due respect,
I'm not going to rehash the motion. That's absolutely untrue. No. Your arguments of record, my comments are of record, and why I ruled as I did is of record. There's nothing that I heard in this trial to suggest anything's changed, even if you're correct in your assumption that you know more than I did at the time. You should have come to the court and say, I want to go into this.
Binger is just at a law school, or he's lost his mind, because some of the things he's doing is absolutely outrageous. Any judge would be mad. Any judge that respects the Constitution and respects the rule of law would be upset. You've got him questioning Second Amendment rights, Fifth Amendment rights, and also the right to an attorney, on witnesses, as well as the accused. I don't know if he's just, I don't know. But basically it's strange, and I don't blame the judge for getting angry. I would get very angry, and the prosecution is very lucky that a mistrial hasn't been called, because every single one of these things is calls for a mistrial, and the judge is being very, very lenient to the prosecution. In complete opposite of what the media is saying, that the judge is so biased. The judge is an old school, toeing the line type of guy. I dug into his record. He's actually always favored the prosecution in most cases, allowing them more leniency. In his over 50 years on the bench, he's only had one case overturned because he allowed the prosecution to submit evidence that was not admissible, and the Supreme Court overturned that conviction as a result. Basically, it was a murder case where he allowed a recording of the victim in that case to be played, saying that if she dies, her husband did it. He allowed the prosecution to play that, and as a result, the case was thrown out by the appellate court because he allowed the prosecution too much leniency. So if anything, this judge is just fair with a proprietary to favor the prosecution, but not in this case, because the prosecution is absolutely blowing it. They have no case. They know they have no case. Even their own witnesses have said that it was self-defense. And I don't know why this case was ever brought to trial. I think it's political, very political. And I think he felt, because Rittenhouse was charged within 48 hours, even though all this video evidence was out there saying that it was self-defense, but he was charged within 48 hours. I think this guy, who is a Democrat, Binger, I think he fears that he'll lose re-election if he doesn't bring the trial. He knows he doesn't have a case. So maybe he's trying to force a mistrial. So he's off the hook, maybe, because my prediction, Rittenhouse walks on everything but the gun charge. I truly believe, because there's no case. That's just the facts. That I never thought Rittenhouse was guilty anyway. I'll admit that. But now, after seeing the evidence, I've given the prosecutor a very fair, a fair chance to present evidence that would change my mind. Me, as an average person, looking at the video, hearing the witnesses, there's no way that I can say that Rittenhouse started any of the altercations. Yes, you could say he shouldn't have been in there. I've stated my opinion that I wouldn't have allowed my 17-year-old to be there, but then again, no one that was there should have been there. Our Constitution provides us the right to peacefully assemble and peacefully protest. Nothing that was going on in Kenosha fit the definition of peaceful protest. It was very much a violent riot, so no one should have been there. So you've got to hold everyone else to the same standards as Rittenhouse if you take that argument. I'm just saying. So basically, it went back and forth. The prosecution, after the defense rested, the prosecution was given the right or the chance to call some rebuttal witnesses. He called James Armstrong, who was a imaging specialist with Milwaukee Crime Lab, and asking him to analyze certain still photographs of the incident that will be submitted into evidence. It took about 20 minutes. And he was basically asked, were any of the photos altered? And he said, no, some of them might have been zoomed or zoomed in, but none of them were altered. So I really don't even understand why this person was brought up. The prosecutor also called Dr. John Black back to the stand to ask him more questions about video and audio from the night of the shooting. Again, asking him if any of it had been altered. Again, going back to what he basically accused Hernandez of, and none of that was proven as well. Basically, now we go into closing arguments. So we should have a verdict next week. And as a result, both Kenosha and Chicago have put out bulletins canceling days off for officers and standing up for what they fear might be a violent reaction to the verdict. It's sad. this case is nothing but politics. It's just a political case from start to finish. Unlike the Ahmaud Arbery case, where I think there's a real crime was committed there, this one was just political from top to bottom, and the prosecution is failing at its job to prove that any of these killings were not self-defense. And it's really sad. It's a lot of wasted money. It's a lot of politicizing. It's just bad. But anyway, we'll know for sure next week. My prediction, he is not guilty on all charges except maybe the gun charge, reckless discharge, maybe. And with that being said, let me know your opinion, and I'll see you. I will not be covering the closing arguments, because we all know they're going to be just a rehash of what we heard in the opening arguments. But I will be here for you. Maybe do a live during the verdict. So anyway, until next time, keep on crying.